Hi everybody, it's Linnea. I have some wintry inspiration for you using the new release from LDRS Creative. So I have a couple of products that I'll be using today, and I'm going to start by stamping out the Polkadoodles Snowdrifts Winnie image. Now I have a little bit of a stamping hack for you. I'm going to be using the LDRS Creative Raven Hybrid ink to stamp my image. And this ink does fabulously stamping just once. You can see my image is perfect and ready to color, but I left my image in my stamping platform. For this hack, you do need a stamping platform. I left it in there, and I'm going to show you why in a little bit. So I had a little handful of markers that I'm going to be using to color this image. This is just a single image, and I'm going to be coloring it simply, so I only needed a few markers. Feel free to screenshot that image if you want to have that for your coloring reference. I'm going to be coloring the majority of this image white and red. So for my whites, I have a colorless blender. I have C0 and C2, and I'm going to start with my darkest. I go back and forth between starting with my darkest and my lightest, but because these colors are so close, I'm going to start with my darkest. So I started with the C2, wherever I'm going to have white in my image and where I want that white to be darkest in shadow. And then I blend it out with the C0, and the 0 is my best friend. The colorless blender is my best friend for when I am coloring whites, because I can really fade out those colors. When you're coloring whites, you still want to have a little bit of shadow. So you can see there that on the crease lines of her skirt, I've given her some shadow, but it still is a white image. For my skin, I'm using E00 and E21, and a little bit of R02 for the cheeks. Then I'm just going to use my brown marker to color in that little twig that's down at her feet. From there, I'm going to color her hair. I'm using YR23 and YR27 to give this a light brown color. This is one of my favorite combinations for coloring hair. I just think it's a really natural color. Okay, so now moving on to the reds. For my reds, I like to start with my lightest, color all over, and then go back with my darkest, then my medium, then my light. Usually when you see me color, I start with my dark and go medium to light, but for reds, I have trouble blending them, so I find that it's easiest for me to lay down a full layer of my lightest color and kind of get that paper nice and saturated, and then work out from there. After I'm done coloring, I'm going to pop this image back into my stamping platform and stamp again with the LDRS Creative Raven Hybrid ink. When I'm coloring darker colors like this dark red, I find that I color over the lines, and so I kind of lose that definition. Stamping again brings that crisp black ink back to the forefront. So now I'm going to work on my background. I have the Pine Tree Forest stamp, and this is just a long stamp, and I'm going to position it in the middle-ish of an A2 card panel. I'm stamping with Pistachios Aplenty ink, and I'm actually going to be double stamping this because it is quite a light ink. And I love that you can stamp it once and have a really, really light mint green, and stamp it twice to have kind of a medium minty green color. So I'm using my stamping platform so I can fill up my whole background with this horizontal line of trees. I found that if I move this image up 1.5 inches, that's about the perfect spacing for this row of trees. So I'm just going to be moving my image up 1.5 inches and then double stamping with that Pistachios Aplenty ink again. And then I'm just going to repeat this process until I have the background full of this Pine Tree Forest stamp. And that's a great way to create my own kind of like a pattern paper background. Okay, so for my sentiment, I'm going to be using the brand new Christmas Wishes Sentiment Stack stamp set. This works just like the previous sentiment stacks from LDRS Creative. You stamp that one image and it has a whole bunch of sentiments. I stamped it with the Raven Hybrid ink, and now I'm going to use that coordinating die to cut this out. The difference here is that these have like a wavy banner edge, whereas the past sentiment stacks are just straight. So I'm going to pick out a sentiment strip, and I do end up changing this in the end, but for now you're going to kind of get the idea of how I think about creating my card. I was going to have my card just be this little girl on top of my pine tree background, but it just wasn't looking right. It was missing something. So I grabbed the City Sidewalks pattern paper pack, and even from the front cover, I noticed this candy cane stripe with those little snowflakes on it. And those snowflakes are like an aqua blue, but when I put it with that Pistachios Aplenty pine tree background, they look like they are meant to go together. So I'm going to cut down my pine tree forest background using a die from the Scalloped Rectangle Frames die set. And then I'm going to put that on top of this City Sidewalks pattern paper. And you're going to kind of see this come together, and I love that pop of red in the background. It ties together the red from her jacket and her hat. So all I'm going to do is just adhere my pattern paper and all my pieces on top of each other. I did end up switching the sentiment to Let It Snow, and I just used my scissors to trim down that banner a little bit more. I added everything with foam tape, and that finishes this card. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!